It is the WTOP Huddle postseason edition. Continues. Dave Johnson, Rob Woodfork, Chris Cichon, Dave Preston, George Wallace. Do we call it a feel-good loss the other night to the Buccaneers? That game turned out, I think, better than most of us expected, unless maybe Rob predicted the correct score. I'm not sure. He always seems to get the score right. I'm still bitter that he beat me on that. But the bottom line is, this is a Washington football team. As we turn the page and we think about, wow, it could have been an upset maybe, but it didn't happen, and we didn't expect it to happen. But now we turn the page. It's into the offseason for this Washington football team. So many questions. Does Ron Rivera continue to be the head coach, general manager? What do you do about Alex Smith? He says he's going to take a few weeks off to decide what his future is. So let's just get right to it, jump into the pool, and talk about what this Washington football team needs to do as it navigates through the offseason with the number 19 pick, I think, is overall in the first round, just to throw that out there as well. We'll start with you, Rob Woodfork, this week.
Well, I think the first thing that has to happen for Washington is they have to be honest in their evaluation of who they are. And that has been a consistent problem with this team since Dan Snyder bought the team, is they will have one of these years where the division is down, they take advantage of it, they get to the playoffs, and then they get delusional about who they are and go out and do something reckless and spend money and act as if they're a team that's one or two pieces away from being a champion. I think that Washington's first step has to be, we are still in year one of what is a rebuild, whether they define it that way or not, and continue to build in the direction of being a team that wins a division every year, whether the rest of the division stinks or not. So I think that's the most important thing. And that part of that entails, if you don't see a quarterback that you love, we all know that quarterback is a big need. It's by far their most high profile need, but it may not in actuality be their biggest need overall. So if you go into this draft and then you force it by taking, just for example, Mac Jones or somebody at 19, unless you're in love with Mac Jones, don't make that pick. So they need help at linebacker. They need a left tackle. Because remember, this is a team that's been blessed for many years with great left tackles, from Chris Samuels to Trent Williams. I mean, they had, what is that? Off the top of my head, I think that was like 13 Pro Bowls between them. They don't have that guy anymore at left tackle. So, you know, you need that. You need help in a bunch of different areas. So don't necessarily go for quarterback at 19. Don't necessarily trade 4 picks to Houston to try and get Deshaun Watson or anything like that.
All right.
You know, things of that nature. Let's just continue to build the way that, you know, the vision that Ron Rivera has. There's no reason to deviate from that. Continue to move in the direction you were moving before you won a division title.
You make a great point. I don't get the impression Ron Rivera is going to be the guy that's going to trade a bunch of draft picks away for a splashy sign.
Right, but Marty Schottenheimer wasn't that guy either, and then he didn't get an opportunity to stick around to continue to see his vision out. So Dan Snyder, as long as Dan Snyder's in the building, all bets are off. So if Ron Rivera has the power that we believe that he does, they should continue to move in the direction that he sees fit.
Yeah, for whatever reason, he really does seem, though, to be in charge. In all the couple decades of this franchise under Dan Snyder's ownership, not to quote a dated quote from Alexander Haig, but I'm in charge here, or that famous quote, but Ron Rivera really does seem to be in charge of this Washington football team. And I think that's part of the reason why I say feel-good loss or feel-good factor. I think he kind of guided everybody through a wounded 2020 that was wounded in so many ways. All right, George, I know you jumped in with a big smile on that trade talk, but let's continue the conversation. We figure out what needs to happen for this Washington football team, or what do we learn about this Washington football team?
Well, see, I would give Houston what they want for Deshaun Watson. I mean, that'd be the guy I would do it for. Not necessarily 4 number ones. I don't think it's going to cost you that. I would give up a couple number ones for Deshaun Watson. I would, because I think,
No, I don't disagree with you. It's just that if you do that, and then you can't put anything around Watson for the next 4 years, which is basically the reason why he's pissed off at Houston to begin with right now.
Right, but you can also argue, I would say, you have some pieces to build around with Gibson, with McLaurin. You got the defense. So you have the pieces there. Yes, to your point, You need the line. You need a left tackle. You hope Sadiq Charles comes back next year. Forgot about him. He played 2 plays this year. Linebacker is going to be a big question mark next year as well. And you know what? I would be okay with a Kyle Allen, Taylor Heineke training camp. And then if that's good, if you don't see something that you love, to your point on the draft, if you don't, or if you don't want to get, if Deshaun Watson doesn't come on the market, or the Lions aren't just going to cut Matthew Stafford, you're going to have to trade for him. I don't know how much I'd give up for Matthew Stafford. If you don't see somebody you love, then I'd be okay with seeing where that can get you, because I don't think Alex Smith is going to be, if he comes back, I would think now after this latest injury, he'd be leaning towards retirement. But then again, anything this guy does, nothing surprises me with what he does. So he may want to come back and try and be a backup and so on and so forth. We'll have to wait and see. But I would say quarterback is a number one spot. And to your point, Dave, about Ron Rivera being in charge, when else do you hear a head coach saying, I'm going to meet with the owner and tell him my intentions for the quarterback spot? As if to say, this is what I'm going to do. This is my team now. So I think, you know, you hear the argument this week about, well, look, we and Dave Preston and I talked about this yesterday. After 2015, you have McLuhan and Kirk Cousins hugging on the field after that playoff loss. Well, this is going here. All right, Robert Griffin III, Shanahan after 12, you know, he gets hurt, but he's going to come back. We're still going this way. I can see where the skepticism is, because we've been to this before. This just feels different. Yeah. It does. And until it's proven to us that it is different, we don't know. But to me, I'm going to say that it just feels different going in that direction because of what Ron Rivera was able to do this year, the buy-in he has from this team, and hopefully the ear of the owner that Ron Rivera has too. Keep in mind, not only this offseason is going to be a big one, not only on the field, but you have the ownership situation and you have the GM that they have to fire a GM. So it's not going to be a normal, quiet offseason, I have a feeling, in Ashburn.
Yeah, and I don't have a law degree from Towson State University, so half this law stuff, goes right over my head. But it does feel different, because when somebody, what is it, 5 playoff appearances in 20 years or 21 years or whatever that is, and I think it's what Rob started out with the discussion, and we'll continue it now with Dave Preston. It is, I think everybody's accepting of, let's just go along where Ron takes us and on a journey that is methodical and that does have a point. I still remember we all remember the euphoria when Joe Gibbs was hired. We thought, all right, that's where this franchise is going to be able to walk on water. There's no sugar pill out there. You've got to do it the right way, or you're going to end up like Washington has, changing every 4 years. And I don't mean politics.
And I think what you have to do when you look at where this franchise is, not necessarily as a division winner that is a few pieces away from contending for a Super Bowl, but say a 7-9 team that got hot at the end, that there are still a lot of deficiencies. The back seven, defensively, the offensive line needs some work. They can use some depth at running back. I'm still not completely sold on who plays wide receiver opposite Terry McLaurin. And back in the day, when you only had 2 wide receivers, 20 years ago, you could live with that. But now with the preponderance of 3 and 4 wide receiver sets, you need another producer out there opposite your main guy who gets a lot of attention. I was impressed with Logan Thomas this season. He can be a decent tight end, but they can always use depth at that position. Go twin tights, as the situation warrants it. I think what's important is we need to know in our heart of hearts that Ron Rivera is the man at the wheel, that Dan Snyder is not taking control of this team, that there's not going to be a draft day coup where all of a sudden they're trading a bunch of picks to go up 5 spots to take a quarterback that they like, because over the years, in the last 20 years, when Dan Snyder has made the quarterback choice, he has made bad choices. And we've seen that time and time again. George mentioned that it feels like every year after they make the playoffs, that there's this new era of good feeling of optimism. I've bought into it once, and that was 2012 when we had RG3 here. It looked like that there was a solid base built by the Shanahans. We had a generational talent who, even though he was hurt, he was going to rehab and not be a headache to the front office. You have to have faith in this team, and you have to have confidence in the fact that Ron Rivera has a 7-win team. He's going to see what he can do to make it a 9 or a 10-win team next year. They might not win the division next year, shocker, But I think that given a full offseason, a proper offseason, an offseason where Ron Rivera can work his program in with new players, with new acquisitions, they might be a better team, even though they won't make the playoffs.
Chi, bring us home on this topic.
I want to go back to a point that George made about trading the house for Deshaun Watson, and I just don't think that's a necessary thing to do.
I didn't say the house. I
But
said
that's
I would
what's gonna.
trade.
No, it's because he wants his Dolphins to be able to. That's the destination he wants.
That is true. That is true. But just with what we have going on here, I don't necessarily think. And recently, Lamar Jackson picked at number 24, or Lamar was number 32. Aaron Rodgers at number 24 overall. You can get a good quarterback with where Washington is sitting at number 19. And that could be, Rob, you and I, exchange some tweets. I like Trey Lance from North Dakota State. I like Zach Wilson from BYU. The Heineke dynamic, where you can run, you can also throw a little bit, and not afraid to use that arm. And with Alex Smith seemingly still probably going to at least be backup. Let's not go into the season again with him starting. But I think we can draft a quarterback here and just refine, as Dave Preston mentioned. A wide receiver, too, needs to be bona fide more so than what they've had with the Sims guys, as opposed to, along with McLaurin. That can really be a ferocious passing attack if you add another piece there. So plenty of work to be done, but I don't agree with going back to the let's trade our picks. I mean, look at how Houston is in this position now with the Dolphins in the top 3 because they thought Laramie Tunsil at offensive tackle was going to solve all their problems, and that hasn't been the case. So I think they sit in a nice position with a young defense to just do your proper research, have your situations. If this guy's taken, well, we have this guy in reserve here, and then go from there into the offseason.
I think though, and maybe I wouldn't trade 4 first round. Maybe I'd trade 2 first rounders for him. Okay, fine. But my argument would be 2. You have to look also now at this NFC East. Believe it or not, this team can be set up in the division. I mean, Philly's a mess. Dallas has their quarterback issues. The Giants, who knows what's going on there. So I think that you don't want to rush into anything, but I think Watson is a proven guy that if you can give up something to pair with this defense, to pair with a young Gibson, a young McLaurin, someone along the offensive line, that would be my reasoning for going for that now.
I would say this, as much as I love Deshaun Watson and as much as I would love to see that number 4 here in Washington, the thing is, if you look at teams that have championship windows, what Kansas City was able to do last season, what Baltimore is hoping to do now, is being able to win it while you're able to put a good team around a young quarterback who's still on a rookie deal. You will never have that with Watson because he's going to have to get paid top of the market money. And in order to keep together that great defense that Washington is building, it's going to require a lot of money. I mean, for Chase Young, once he becomes a free agent, I mean, he's probably going to set records for whatever it is that they're going to have to pay him. Montez Sweat is a guy who probably you could make a case for being $100 million guy. So, I know I'm getting ahead of myself here because we're still 3 years down the line, but you have to have that viewpoint as a franchise to look 3 years down the line and say, well, we could afford Watson today, but 3 years down the line, we're going to have to let go of some of these really good young pieces that we have on defense. And so that to me is the only reason that gives me, I would love for Deshaun Watson to be here, trust me. But I just think that for lesser, and you guys are going to laugh at me for keep bringing up Cam Newton, but Cam Newton's going to, he's played in this offense. And as far as I'm concerned, he's better than anything you have in the building right now. As a matter of fact, Heineke is the only guy I bring back who's presently in the quarterback room.
Cam Newton's never gone as long as we can still keep talking about him as a possibility.
10 years from now, the WTOP Huddle, we're going to be bringing Cam Newton back. That'll be the bottom line.
I'll have one jersey already made for myself to wear to these Zoom sessions.
But one thing, and I think a theme is developing here, that while there's so much focus on quarterback, and it's such an important position, you don't want to get seduced by the wrong quarterback or your desire that you want the wrong quarterback. And you think about who Washington was playing this past Saturday. Tom Brady was not a coveted draft pick, and he is the GOAT, as I seem to be reminded every other sentence when when somebody's talking about Tom Brady, and deservedly so. He's got, so you could
And
develop.
Russell Wilson, a more recent example of that. You can find guys, and maybe that's not even a great comp anymore, because the only reason he fell as far as he did was because that was at a time when nobody thought guys who were short quarterbacks could play. But he's dispelled that. You have Kyler Murray, a number 1 overall pick now. But to that point, though, you can get guys later in the draft. You just have to love that. It's like a relationship. You can't be in a relationship with somebody like, you know what, she's all right. I could hang out with her. I could live with her. No, you have to be excited about it. You have to say, no. I need to do this. That's what you need to have at quarterback. You got to have a quarterback where you're excited to get that guy in the quarterback room. You're excited to get him on the practice field. Washington doesn't have that guy. They need to get that guy, whether it's round 1, round 2, round 6, whatever.
And at Rob's point, wouldn't it be cool if Taylor Heineke was Kurt Warner 2.0? There's another example of somebody. Yeah. The most famous Iowa barnstormer in the history of arena football.
But you can't count on that. You can't go into the season saying, well, Heineke's going to be Kurt Warner 2.0. And just like to Chris's point with the receivers, it's one thing if you play Cam Sims out of necessity. It's one thing if you play, the other Sims out of necessity. If you go into a season and say, all right, these guys are my 2 and 3 wideouts, that's a problem. You got to upgrade.
Bottom line is the defense is legit, and that's a strong rock foundation. I've always said on offense, doesn't matter who your quarterback is, you need that offensive line. But the fact that they established that defense this year, I think is critical for the Washington team going forward. Anything else? Anybody want to make a point on the Washington team before we move on to who's left in postseason?
I'm going to jump off here and move on because I got to do this whole sports thing. But I watch for in the coming weeks. I'm curious to see where we go with this GM situation. I think that's going to be the first thing that's going to fall, and see what Ron Rivera does. He said he wasn't going to talk about it until after he meets with Snyder and then takes a step back from the season. But I think that's going to be one of the first things he does this offseason. Good to see you guys. Happy divisional round of the playoffs.
All right, there we go. George Wallace. All right, we move on. Dave Preston, anything else on Washington or what else is on your mind?
Something on my mind, if we can switch gears for a second. College basketball, huge game for the men this Saturday. Atlantic 10, I think possibly the most underrated rivalry in our area. If you want to stretch all the way down to Richmond, is Richmond and VCU. They share a city, they share a league. They share Cinderella status as the Spiders upset teams back in the 80s and 90s, and the Rams have been the current giant killer. They play this Saturday, and it's a great appetizer for football. I think it's a 2:00 tip-off. It may very well be for the A10 lead. So some good hoops on a Saturday afternoon.
See, this show's unscripted. I wasn't prepared for Richmond VCU, so well done.
You'll be on air talking about it, so there you go.
G, what's got you going? I mean, we got the Ravens coming up. They've got the big game. What's on your mind?
Yeah, so I'm going to talk Ravens here a little bit because a stat pointed out by Jamison Hensley kind of caught my attention earlier this week. It's the first time Ravens are underdogs with Lamar Jackson as their quarterback since week 11 in Indianapolis. More so, even more importantly, they're 5-2 outright when they are underdogs with Jackson as their starting quarterbacks. And both of those losses were to Kansas City. I think saying all that, it kind of reaffirms my belief that the Ravens, I believe, can definitely beat the Buffalo Bills, even up in Buffalo. And Saturday night game up there, it is going to be, I would imagine, freezing cold, potentially snow. It plays right into their advantage. What they want to do is run the football. Josh Allen has obviously, gotten familiar with the atmosphere up there, but let's say it's 10 degrees. Is he throwing with really clear passing lanes and able to really play effectively against a strong Ravens defense that we saw Marcus Peters? And this is a little bit of a different matchup because A.J. Brown was kind of working Marlon Humphrey. I mean, he was like doubled his size. Steph Diggs is a little bit more finesse. I think that plays better for Ravens secondary. I just think this kind of all sets up well for Baltimore to potentially see Kansas City, as those two losses were as underdogs. They'll be an underdog again in the AFC Championship game, but I like Baltimore's chances to take on the Chiefs in the AFC Championship. Because, yes, I am kind of assuming that the Browns, it was a nice win against the Steelers, but they're not good enough to beat the Chiefs.
Yeah, and as impressive as Lamar Jackson was, that Ravens defense shutting down Derrick Henry, that definitely made me a believer as well. Rob?
And just to piggyback on that, because that is, to me, the biggest game of the weekend, because I think the winner of that game could end up being representing the AFC in the Super Bowl. I mean, that's how good the season that Buffalo has had. And I think the Ravens have the exact ingredients right now to not only beat that team, but to make a deep run. And I think that the way that they won in Tennessee, the way that they won, not just getting off the schneid and all of that and shutting down Derrick Henry, all of that is impressive. But this was a team, how many times have we said it this year? They can't come from behind. You know, you get them down early, you got them. And now they've shown, forget showing us, they've shown themselves. They've proven to themselves that we can get down double digits, but we still have what it takes to fight our way through it and get a W. So I think the way that they won that game is the kind of win that propels them to having a title run. And we pointed it out last week. They've only won the Super Bowl as a wild card. When they're the 14-2 team that's dominant and everybody's picking you to win, that's not how they win. When they're the underdog and when they're doubted and when they have to go on the road and when they have to gut it out and they have to use defense and running and all that, that is when they tend to be at their best. So for going to Buffalo, going to Kansas City, and Kansas City hasn't been very impressive the last 2 months of the season. As great as they are, they haven't had to play in this. And I feel like we saw this with that big Steelers upset, is if you are, if you're one of those teams that coasts into the playoffs and you're resting players in week 17 and you're not playing meaningful football for a month, and then you have to go and, try to go on and try to play a team that's hot coming off of a playoff win, that's not always a good recipe for success. So if it takes Kansas City a quarter or two to warm up, I think the Browns have a chance to win that game. Same thing with the Ravens. I think they can go on the road and I think they can get this thing done.
Well, we had so much fun with the Super Wild Card Weekend. They didn't give the divisional round a fun name, but it's going to be a lot of football coming up, and as always, a lot of fun talking about it. And so glad that you spent some time with us in the WTOP Huddle.
Break.